Welcome to the What Really Happened radio show. Because World War III is a really bad idea. Here is your host, Michael Rivero.
Aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It is Thursday, August 6, 2015, and sure happy it's Thursday, sure happy it's Thursday, sure happy it's Thursday. We've got a lot of stuff to talk about today. Obviously, everybody's waiting with bated breath the start of the first GOP debate of the 2016 campaign, which is still some hours away, and everybody's wrangling about that. Our phone lines are open, 877-300-7645, 877-300-7645. Don is in our control room, twiddling the dials, keeping us out of trouble, ready to answer the phone when you call on in. Now, just a reminder, in the third hour of our show today, we're going to have Larry Nichols joining us to talk about, well, his experience with the Clintons all the way back to Arkansas in the 1990s, and I've known Larry basically almost since the day I started this whole venture, or was actually, to be more accurate, driven into it. I didn't wake up one day and say, I think I'm going to throw away a successful, growing film career to become a truth movement person. It was kind of not a choice I made. It was made for me. But here I am, here we are, and Larry Nichols will be joining us to talk about that this afternoon. Now, along with being the day of the first GOP debate, today, August 6th, is the anniversary of Hiroshima, when the U.S. government dropped the little boy uranium bomb on the city of Hiroshima, Japan, and killed anywhere between 80,000 and 100,000 people. They're not really sure. They just obliterated the city. And, of course, a lot of people died in the months and years afterward from radiation-induced illnesses. And in the intervening years, it's come out, basically, the only reason the bombs were dropped by Harry Truman was to let the world know we had these horrible weapons and were psychotic enough to use them, because Japan was already defeated. The Japanese Air Force had been destroyed. The B-29s were just flying unmolested all over Japan. They had firebombed Tokyo twice. The Japanese government was actually in the process of trying to surrender. And the Truman administration said, we don't want to talk to you. We've got a little surprise coming up for you in August. And they dropped the two bombs. And the official story given to the world and the American people is, oh, look, we saved lives because if we'd had to invade the Japanese mainland, it would have been millions more dead. And that is absolutely not true. Japan was out of raw material, out of food, out of everything. They were trying to surrender at that moment. But the U.S. had created this big stick, and they wanted to demonstrate to the world not only that the U.S. had the atomic bomb, but was psychotic enough to use it. And in all this discussion, we've been hearing about Iraq's non-existent nuclear weapons and Iran's non-existent nuclear weapons. It is worth remembering today that in the history of the world, there's only ever been one nation that used a nuclear weapon of mass destruction against civilians of another country, and that is the United States of America. Now, I'm already getting all this email in there saying, well, you know, we used the nukes on Japan to pay them back for Pearl Harbor, and there was a sneak attack, and therefore everything that we did in retaliation, no, even if it's 100-fold, it was justified. But that, too, is not historically accurate. We talk about this every December 7th. And I posted a link to scans of the original memo written by Lieutenant Commander Arthur McCollum in the Office of Naval Intelligence. He wrote the memo October 7th, 1940. And the memo set out an 8-step plan to provoke Japan into attacking the United States. Now, what was going on here is the tide of war had already turned against Nazi Germany on the Eastern Front. The Russian forces and the Russian winter clobbered them. Roosevelt was eager to get the U.S. into the war to share in the coming plunder. Now, Britain's Churchill was desperate for open U.S. involvement and support, but Roosevelt demanded a heavy price, that Britain surrender the pound sterling's position as the global trade and banking currency and allow the dollar to take over. Churchill obviously did not want that to happen. He held out for as long as he could, but finally was forced to capitulate. That left only one obstacle for Roosevelt, the American people, for whom the horrors of World War I were still a fresh memory. It was a very short interval between those two world wars. Roosevelt needed to start the war but make it look like the U.S. was attacked. Germany refused to provide such a provocation. Roosevelt had the U.S. Navy sinking German ships hoping Germany would counterattack. And Hitler refused to do that. Hitler did not want to go to war with the United States of America. So when Japan signed the Axis Agreement, Roosevelt saw a way to do it. And he adopted McCollum's plan, and during 1941, Roosevelt followed all 8 steps of the plan, which were incidents which to the American sensibilities looked like minor things, but to the Japanese sensibilities were horrible, deadly insults. And as soon as Roosevelt completed step number 8, the Japanese attacked at Pearl Harbor. But it was not a surprise. In fact, there was a Navy exercise, Task Force 29, U.S. warships northwest of Oahu, right in the path of the oncoming Japanese attack force. And Roosevelt called up Admiral Kimmel and said, "You get those ships back in port now." And Kimmel said, "Why?" And Roosevelt said, "None of your business." And that's how we got into World War II. And Roosevelt went out pretending it was this completely unprovoked, totally surprise attack by Japan in his famous Day of Infamy speech. So that's what's going on. Now, here's an interesting little footnote. Apparently, President Truman's grandson has become a strong anti-nuclear activist. And he's out there saying, don't hold your breath ever waiting for the U.S. to apologize for Hiroshima and Nagasaki. It's not going to happen. And apparently his family had some serious problems with what had been done, because apparently this grandson grew up, aware that Grandpa Harry was coming around every once in a while and everything, but nobody ever told him that Grandpa Harry was President Harry Truman. He didn't learn that until he went to school and saw the pictures in the book. So apparently there was some misgivings within the Truman family over what was going on. Now, with this idea that using the bomb somehow saved lives being absolutely destroyed by historical reality, the U.S. has now adopted a new piece of propaganda. And what they're out there saying, this is actually being reported over in, let's see, where is that? Facti.org. The latest propaganda going out is, well, the use of the atomic bombs saved Japan from being invaded and occupied by the Soviet Union. That would have been a fate far worse than merely having a bomb go off over your head, so you should be grateful to us. We saved you from the evil Soviet Union. Now, today is also the anniversary of the first execution by electric chair. A guy named William Kemmler was strapped into the chair, and a lot of people are unaware of this. Thomas Edison was involved in developing the electric chair as a means of execution. Now, Edison himself was actually opposed to capital punishment, but he was also a businessman, and he was locked in this struggle with George Westinghouse over whose electric system was going to become the national standard. Huge amounts of money involved. Edison had developed DC power to power his electric light and various other devices he'd invented, and George Westinghouse, working together with Nikola Tesla, who had worked with Edison, and then Edison ticked him off and he went over to Westinghouse, had come up with the alternating current system, which is far more efficient than DC at long-range transmission. So there was this fight going on between Westinghouse and Edison over which system would be adopted. And Edison decided to launch a propaganda campaign that alternating current was far more dangerous and deadly than direct current, which happens to be exactly the opposite of the reality. But we're talking money here, not safety. And when we come back from this commercial break, I'll tell you some of the aspects of Edison's career that generally don't get mentioned in public school. We'll be right back. Well, hi, America. Welcome back to the show. And we're talking about the anniversary of the first execution in the electric chair and the strange role that inventor Thomas Edison played in it. And as I mentioned before I went to the commercial break, Edison was locked in mortal combat with George Westinghouse over whose system would be declared the national standard, Edison's direct current system or George Westinghouse's clearly superior alternating current system. And Edison and his backers launched a public relations campaign to convince Americans that alternating current was just too dangerous to have in the home. And they literally went around electrocuting animals in public with alternating current, up to and including an elephant. And there's actually, somebody shot a movie, and you can find it on YouTube, where Edison zapped this elephant, just killed it dead. And to cement the point home, Edison, even though he personally was opposed to capital punishment, he worked with the state of New Jersey to help build the first electric chair. And the condemned murderer, William Kemmler, was put into it, and they zapped him and said, see, instantaneous death, how dangerous AC is. Well, then it sort of came out that Kemmler wasn't really dead, and they had to flip the switch back on, and it took him 8 minutes to die. Because, contrary to Edison's propaganda, alternating current, yes, it's deadly, but it's not as deadly as direct current. Because any alternating current tends to travel along the surface of the conductor rather than the center. The higher the frequency, the more you see that effect, which is why a Tesla coil can send thousands of volts through your body and you won't even feel it. And Westinghouse, of course, seized on this horrible disaster with Kemmler's execution, because the press there were reporting on the horrible smells and the screams and everything, and was able to just crush Edison's publicity campaign, and that's why we have the Westinghouse alternating current as our national standard. Little bit of history they don't teach you in the public schools about the Wizard of Menlo Park. Now, I just got an email noting that on all the websites talking about the Hiroshima bomb and everything, the obvious paid online shills are out there saying, well, the Nazis were evil and we had to use the bomb and the Russians were cruel and we're right, and all this nonsense that's out there. They're trying to cement this idea that it was great for the United States to use nuclear weapons, but everybody else with a nuclear weapon is bad, evil, and needs to be invaded. Because the world is smart enough to realize, Iraq did not have nuclear weapons. Iran does not have nuclear weapons. Everybody's screaming about nuclear proliferation, but the two countries that are the real threat to the world with nuclear weapons, the United States and Israel, we can't talk about them. That's not politically correct. We'll hurt their little feelings. Anyway. Now, as you no doubt are aware, especially if you're watching the Fox News feed, we are hours away from these two televised debates of the GOP candidates. At 5 p.m., Eastern Time, they're going to have the kiddie table, which are the 7 GOP candidates who are at the bottom of the polls. Nobody's really expected to watch that very much, and it's pretty much presumed that these 7 are already toast in terms of the future candidate. Unless an asteroid strikes the studio where the top 10 are going to be doing their press conference at 9 p.m. Eastern Time. Donald Trump is in the center. They could hardly put him out on the edge because of his poll numbers, and he's flanked by Jeb Bush and Scott Walker. That's basically the trio everyone's paying attention to. And you've got Rick Perry and all the rest who are just barely made the cut, and they're arguing and screaming. But the reality here is at this point, after tonight, we're going to be looking at 3 GOP candidates, Trump, Bush, and Walker. The problem with the Fox News debate is the moderator is very much opposed to Trump, very much a supporter of Jeb Bush. So we're going to see the questions designed and engineered to make Bush and Walker look good and Trump look bad. That's just what they're going to do, because the corporate TV news networks see it as part of the job for which they are paid all those millions of dollars to decide for you who the candidates are going to be, which of course does not represent democracy at all. We're supposed to pick our own candidates, then we pick which one of the candidates we think ought to get the job. Not just line up every 4 years on a stage where corporate media and Wall Street have put up the candidates and pick which one we're going to be slaves to for the next several years. What's really interesting, I was watching on Fox News earlier today, where they're out there, they're already dismissing Trump. Oh, Trump's a joke. He's going to go away. We've got to focus on Jeb Bush. He's the favored establishment candidate. And they keep pushing that word establishment. And apparently they have not woken up to the fact that for the majority of the American people, establishment is now a 4-letter word. And Trump's popularity, and to a lesser extent Bernie Sanders, are based on the fact that they're not seen as establishment insiders. Establishment getting ready to fall down, go boom. And they're not really there yet. They're trying to use the word establishment as a selling point for Jeb Bush and Scott Walker. No, I don't want another establishment hack in the White House or the Congress. And neither, apparently, do most Americans, because that's why Trump is doing very well. Now, there are already articles out there saying, oh, Trump will be a disaster. He will sell us out. He will do this and he will do that. I mean, they're giving him the Ron Paul treatment. There's just no question about that whatsoever. Now, there's an article over in Sputnik News, will Donald Trump save America and the world by making a deal with Putin? Now, I question the headline. It sort of casts a potential deal as a bad thing. He's going to make a deal. But they are talking accurately about save America and the world, because right now the establishment GOP candidates are unanimous in wanting regime change in Russia, no matter what it costs. They absolutely hate Putin for having his own opinion about what's going on in the world and wanting to run Russia for the benefit of the Russian people instead of U.S. financial interest. And that's why Putin is on the U.S. government's special high-interest targets list. They were all buddy until Putin took control of Russia's central bank. It's still privately owned, but it's controlled by the Russian government, so that Russia's public currency is managed as a public utility, and that is why he is so hated by every nation still enslaved to a private central bank. And they want him out. And they don't, the Fox News and the GOP establishment don't want to have any candidate who's not on board with going to war with Russia. So that after the election, it doesn't matter who wins, there will be war with Russia, and anybody who complains, hey, you voted for the guy who wanted war with Russia. Yeah, you took away anybody else who might have a different idea. That's what they're trying to do. That's what they are trying to do. All right, we're going to take a break for commercials. When we come on back, Ted Cruz, I think, just shot himself down in a very real way. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. So over at WhatReallyHappened.com, we've linked to a video on YouTube called Making Machine Gun Bacon. And it stars presidential candidate Ted, born in Canada, Cruz. And apparently it's a segment from a gun show where Ted showed up to get his face on camera and get seen, where he's at a gun range with a machine gun. And they wrapped some foil and raw bacon around the gun barrel, and Ted fired the gun long enough for the barrel to cook the bacon. And in that one moment, Ted, born in Canada, Cruz, manages to make gun owners in general and himself look like total idiots. I think it was kind of counterproductive. I don't know any real gun enthusiasts who think that's a cool thing to do. All righty, we're going to grab ourselves a phone call. Arrow in the Netherlands. Aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yes, hello, Mike. Aloha. I want to say the first about Hiroshima and Nagasaki. The first was in Nevada, I thought, the first atomic test. Is that correct?
No, it was actually in New Mexico. It was called Project Trinity.
Trinity.
Yeah, and I actually have in the world-famous WhatReallyHappened.com debris collection, I have a fragment of the sand that was melted into green glass underneath that first test bomb.
Wow. Okay. Because I want to make clear that also in the movie The Matrix, there was a woman called Trinity.
Yes.
Yeah. But to go further in the atomic bomb in
I mean, there were a lot of literary, religious allusions in the entire movie. The human colony was called Zion. The ship was called the Nebuchadnezzar. There's a lot of that stuff in there for people to say, "Ooh, I wonder what it means." Doesn't mean anything. They're selling a movie ticket.
Mm-hmm. Also, the testing was I heard that from my brother because he is also a scientist he said to me, the first thing they did with the atomic bomb, they didn't know if it would blow up the world. So if the particles could go, around the atmosphere and everything. And I was like, wow, did they really do that kind of crazy things, And they really did it. But the second bomb, what my mother told me, is they were testing how it will react on people.
Well, that was definitely a big part of both Hiroshima and Nagasaki. I mean, they had developed two completely different types of nuclear weapons. The little boy was your basic uranium bomb, slap two chunks together, make it go bang. Fat Man, of course, was the far more complicated plutonium implosion bomb, which had the potential for not only more power, but much more control over the yield. Something that you really couldn't get with the uranium bomb.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and the only last thing I want to say, two things more. Remember Pearl Harbor, because that is why it started, isn't it?
No, that's not why it started. Pearl Harbor was the hoax used to trick Americans into getting into World War II. For most Americans in 1945, World War I was still a recent memory, and they wanted nothing to do with another European war, and Roosevelt needed Pearl Harbor to reverse public opinion and get them ready to sign up and go off and deal with Japan, except, of course, everybody went off to Germany first, and it was only after Germany was defeated that they finally put the resources into the Pacific Ocean to finish off Japan.
Yeah. And the last thing I want your reaction on is maybe I listened it yesterday or 2 days ago, but that's very interesting for me also. But I hear it from more intelligence guys from on the internet and ex guys, I must say. Maybe you talked about it, about the Israeli embassy, that there was traces of radiation.
Yes, when the Nuclear Emergency Search Team was generating their baseline maps over major cities, they discovered radioactivity coming out of Israel's consulate in New York. Israel won't explain what the source is, will not allow examination. Israel maintains its Israeli sovereign territory, and the U.S. government may not go in.
Okay, very interesting. And I want to point you out, I don't know if you know the STG report. STG report.
Okay, what does the acronym mean? Because it's not, I've got a couple.
STG is on the internet. It goes about the financing stuff and things. And the last video I watched today is that there's really a big thing going on with the elite. They are really in panic and they are buying stuff up like crazy, because something's going to hit the fan. And
I've seen similar reports. I've seen similar reports. Basically, the money junkies understand that ink and paper stuff and the numbers in the computer isn't really worth anything, so they're trying to basically dump their cash in exchange for hard assets, whether it's silver, gold, fine art, larger houses or whatever. Yeah, they're trying to move into asset-based wealth ahead of the collapse of the currency.
Yeah, because it's going to happen eventually.
It has to.
You can't stop it, But hey, thank you very much, Mike, and I thank you for having my call, and I wish you all the best.
All right, thank you very much for the phone call. We're going to let you go. Now, getting on back to the political candidates here, the situation for, let's see, I have to answer something here. There we are. Okay. The situation for Hillary Clinton is starting to get really, really nasty. Okay? We've been hearing about how all of a sudden there's an official FBI investigation into the security of her server. Now, Larry Klayman has filed a motion with the court demanding the court take custody of this thumb drive that Hillary's attorney David Kendall has, supposedly containing classified information that was kept illegally by Hillary Clinton on her private email server. Now, where it gets really interesting is, according to this complaint by Larry Klayman, There is evidence that Hillary intended to sell this information for financial compensation, donations to the charity, whatever. And this makes it a criminal case. Now, no doubt David Kendall is going to claim attorney-client privilege, and you're not allowed to look at the thumb drive. You're just going to have to take our word that it's okay. And it's getting kind of ugly. Now, the fact that the FBI is investigating may not automatically be a good thing. The FBI will step in to investigate because then they can head off all the other investigations going on and commandeer all the evidence in order to protect people. Remember, the FBI covered up the murder of White House Deputy Counsel Vincent Foster on behalf of the Clintons. And they may be getting ready to come on in and say, we've investigated and we have found that Hillary Clinton did absolutely nothing wrong and you should vote her into the White House just out of that sense of guilt that you even dared suspect her of wrongdoing. So the fact that there's an FBI investigation is not necessarily reassuring. However, we are hearing from the heads of multiple intelligence agents that Hillary Clinton should be stripped of all of her security clearances right now. And given that she's not officially part of the U.S. government, that should have happened anyway. I think for those high-level clearances, and I could be wrong, but for those high-level security clearances, you're not allowed to keep them when you end the job. You're not allowed to continue getting access to that information. We're going to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. Oh, hi, America. Welcome back to the show here. I'm looking at Fox News, and they're using the impending debate to hawk their election app for your smart device. Just download and install this, and we'll tell you all you need to know about the candidates. Don't even think about going out to the independent media or even listening to the actual candidates themselves, especially Donald Trump. We'll tell you what to think about what's going on here. Yeah, that'll be a cold day in the dark regions. All righty, now getting on back to Hillary Clinton, apparently undeterred by the fact that the FBI is engaged in a criminal investigation over her mishandling of classified information. She's off and running and still campaigning, and I love the headline on this story over at PJ Media, Hillary to study the plight of working Americans at a $2,700 per plate Hamptons fundraiser. Yeah, I'm sure that Hillary and all those people living in the Hamptons who are able to plunk down the price of a car for a photo op with the former Secretary of State are concerned about the plight of working Americans. And she's out there still trying to sell this image that I'm just like you. I'm poor, my husband's poor, my daughter's poor, the upstairs maid is poor, the chauffeur's poor, my lawyer is poor, my secretary is poor, we're all poor, 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 poor. Excuse me, I got to go off to Bergdorf Goodman and get an $800 haircut. Okay, so anyway, we're going to go ahead and grab ourselves a phone call. Damien in New York, aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike, how you doing? I'm loving all this that's going on. They're really exposing the corporate Democrats and the corporate Republicans and the mainstream media. And, all this, there's a bunch of shows that were canceled on the MSNBC, and a lot of those people were just not towing the Hillary, corporate Democratic, line, and, they got the old heave-ho. But I had mentioned it last time. I had called Ed Schultz has started his own show, and it's really interesting how many people have really come around. He changed his position on a lot of things, Keystone, a couple of things, and he's really kind of become more aware. So I'm glad to see these people, some of them, basically growing a conscience or just opening their eyes finally, and they're really coming, towards the side of right and where you've been on for all this time. And I think it's just, I think it's fantastic. The whole thing is kind of imploding a bit, and the people are just becoming more and more aware of the corruption, the corporate greed, and how all of these kind of systems in place are just fueling that fire. So I'm really, honestly, I'm really enjoying all this. And and I agree with you as far as Donald Trump is concerned. You know, I don't agree with him a lot of things idealistically or anything like that, but he is saying things and talking about things and bringing things up that others aren't. Bernie Sanders is bringing up some amazing things that I have never heard any candidate actually talk about, and it's all the stuff that, you know, we talk about. There's a Vox interview that he did that he mentioned some things actually I had never heard him mention before, and I was quite impressed by that. And it's just I'm glad to see that this is big. There's a big movement happening, and this
the movement is anti-establishment.
Democrats and Republicans.
The American electorate is sick and tired of the establishment, and it's amazing to see the corporate media still out there saying, well, these are the recognized establishment candidates, and they don't realize that is exactly why people are turning their backs on them. We don't want another establishment candidate. We don't want another Bush. We don't want another Clinton. Okay? Americans want major change, and they're looking for anybody that can basically trigger that dynamic all-at-once change. We're sick and tired of being told that if you vote us in 4 or 8 years, things will be a little bit better, and it never happens. The American people are ready for a dramatic shift in the country, and that's Trump's attraction. Yeah, he's a bit of a goofball, but you know something? He feels more real than all those other candidates up there on the stage.
And he's not all talk. He's a businessman. He's used to getting all things done. He admits, you know, hey, look, I'm not a debater. I'm not a talker. I'm a doer. I'm a man of action. And we all know exactly the politicians, that's the game they play. They'll say anything they need to say to get elected. But if you look at their record, it contradicts and shows them to be complete hypocrites. And that should be the proof right there for most people. But, you know, in the past, it's been, just a lot of people sort of following the, that corporate mechanism, the media. And, it's just, I love that it's being exposed so much. And, thank you for everything you're doing again, Michael. I mean, every time I call it, pretty much I'm saying thank you. But I mean, seriously, you're an amazing voice out there, and you've got a lot of people that have been listening to you, and you got a lot of people that are gravitating towards you. And, it's going to become really interesting to see what happens in the rest of this year and into next year.
Yes, it certainly will. Thank you very much for the kind words. We're going to let you go. I think one of the areas in which the establishment has stumbled badly is they're continuing to use their celebrity status as a selling point. You know, they're putting Jeb Bush out there as, you know, more of the George Herbert Walker Bush, more of the George W. Bush legacy. But Americans are living with that legacy every day, especially those people who have family members who were killed and crippled in these wars. The name value just isn't there anymore. The same is true for Hillary Clinton. She's trying to campaign in part on President Bill Clinton, but we're looking back and realizing what a disaster that was. I think an indicator of this is how badly they stumbled trying to use John McCain's star power against Donald Trump. And it fizzled badly because in the age of the Internet, most Americans understand John McCain's status as a hero is as real as Saddam's nuclear weapons. It's manufactured. He's just a politically connected goofball who should have been drummed out of the service long before he ever got to Vietnam. And he is propped up by the fact that he and his father are hereditary servants to Almighty Israel, going back to the USS Liberty. And that's basically it, and everybody understands. Songbird McCain qualifies as an enemy ace. He lost 5 airplanes during his career. He gave secrets to the North Vietnamese. There were actually charges filed against him when he returned from Vietnam, and he was pardoned by Richard Nixon, so that he could go back to being a star of the GOP. All right, we're going to grab a phone call before the news break. Dustin in New Jersey, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, hi, Mike. And he also managed to destroy an aircraft carrier, which we sold to a scrapyard in Texas for a penny.
Yeah, the Forrestal. What a goofball.
Mike, I hate to be a Debbie Downer, but all this, it doesn't matter who gets in. The system is just, it'll eat them up. The system is not going to allow anybody to change the system, you know?
Well, I know that. That's why I keep saying they're giving Donald Trump the Ron Paul treatment. If that doesn't work, they'll give him the Robert Kennedy treatment. The problem is if everybody understands that's what's going on, the system will destroy itself by taking that extreme measure. You know, it's one thing when we're naive and innocent and trusting back when Robert Kennedy was killed and we bought this whole thing about, oh, this crazed lone nut Palestinian Sirhan did it, that's all you need to think about, and people went along with that. But it's a very different age right now. Nobody trusts anything the government says or the corporate media says. We're expecting more false flags and hoaxes and assassinations. And that makes the price of taking those steps very, very high indeed.
And you know what's really scary? It's like when Obama got in, you still got the neocons embedded in the State Department, in the Pentagon. They're everywhere, and it just seems like they are
let's stop using the term neocon here and call them what they are. They're war hawks. They are people whose personal fortunes and power are dependent on the creation of a new world war, and that's what they're trying to do. And you're right. It really doesn't matter who gets elected into the White House, more or less, because the war agenda is coming from above the White House, meaning primarily Wall Street, and certainly Israel. But the structure of control now stands exposed. And that is when a covert structure of control is at its weakest, when everybody sees it. Remember, we have a coffee cup that we sell over at our online store. The fastest way to bring down a dictatorship is to force them to act like one where everybody can see it. And that's the phase we are at right now. Dustin, I'm going to have to let you go now. We've got to take a break for our top of the hour news. And we'll be back with hour number 2 after these few words. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 2. The phone lines are open, 877-300-7645, 877-300-7645. And I want to add a little postscript to that story about the Stradivarius violin, because everybody says, oh, the Stradivarius violin's an amazing tone. We could never duplicate it. And it turns out, and not to take away from the craftsmanship of Stradivarius and his contemporaries, but the latest research indicates that the superior tone and quality of the violins from that era were caused by the Little Ice Age, which slowed tree growth, resulting in denser wood that created a superior tone and brilliance in musical instruments crafted from it. So, a little bit of science to go in there. All righty, getting on back to the news. The U.S. war hawks are out there saying, you know, to heck with this idea that we're talking about peace or anything, we need to take over Ukraine, and they're basically lobbying to flood Ukraine with U.S. weapons. Now, we already know that Poroshenko is violating the Minsk Accords on a daily, regular basis, 20 to 30 violations per day. And American hawks are saying, let's stop the pretense. Yes, we're conquering the world. Let's go ahead and just do it and get it over with. Now, meanwhile, the OSCE has come under fire for perceived bias in the reporting of these violations by Kiev. And so the OSCE is already on the defensive, and apparently Russia has decided to use that opportunity of a more pliant, willing to go along, to get along OSCE, saying it is now time for an international tribunal looking into war crimes committed by the United States of America in Vietnam. And yeah, I think maybe it's about due. When this whole issue of waterboarding surfaced in Iraq, a lot of people, veterans, came forward to say, yeah, the U.S. was using that in Vietnam. They were using torture. It's just part of what we do, you know. You're not supposed to know about it, but yeah, we're doing that. Now, there's another growing scandal regarding the genocide down in Guatemala, and apparently revelations that the U.S. was directly involved in sending the weapons and encouraging this genocide down there. It's another little piece of hidden history of the U.S. that you're never going to be taught in public school. It's never going to be a feature film from Hollywood or mentioned on the corporate media. Now, getting on over to the situation between Obama and Netanyahu and Israel and Iran, Obama was out there in a briefing before 22 Jewish leaders. Obama said, I'm willing to meet with Netanyahu and try and smooth things over here, But Netanyahu is refusing to meet with Obama and indicating he is going to continue to fight to block the Iran deal, even though large numbers of people within Israel's own government are saying this is a good deal for us. Let's go along with it. Members of the Knesset, members of the intelligence, members of the military are saying, why are you still doing this? This is a good deal. Let's go with it. What's going on here right now, Netanyahu has bet his entire political image and Israeli control over the U.S. government on succeeding at stopping the Iran deal. If he fails or quits, his own reputation is diminished, and American politicians are going to say, hey, that iron grip of Israel around the throats of the government, that's kind of starting to slip. I don't have to listen to them as much anymore. I can maybe go and start listening back to the American people. You know, I can ignore these demands by Israel for more money and more weapons and the rest. So what's at stake here is more than just Iran. What's at stake here is the, up until recently, clandestine image of Israel as master of the world, certainly master of the United States of America. And Netanyahu's full-court press trying to kill this Iran deal is all about his self-image, his power, his personal glory, and maintaining the image that Israel is, in fact, in covert control of the United States government. And he's up against tremendous opposition. Israel's president, Rivlin, is out there saying Netanyahu's anti-Iran drive is isolating Israel politically from the rest of the world. And he's absolutely correct. The whole world is seeing what's going on. The whole world is seeing Israel reach into the U.S. government and say, you will do what Israel wants. And even Obama came out in his recent speech saying that this is an issue of Netanyahu. He singled Netanyahu out as the warmonger that has to be dealt with. Now, in his recent speech on the Iran deal, Obama actually came out and with a statement, it is an abrogation of my constitutional duty to defer to Israel on the Iran deal. Most Americans probably just missed this entirely, but it sent shockwaves through the rest of the world and especially Israel's government, because basically Obama came out and said, yeah, Israel is meddling in our country. It is Israel that wants the Iran deal killed. And there's a great deal of brinksmanship going on there. And it really is, that's really what's at stake. Israel's ability to direct the foreign policy of the United States of America is on the line here. And the irony is they've already lost. Because even if Israel's whores in the U.S. Congress are able to come up with a veto-proof majority to pass a bill that ends U.S. participation in the P5+1 deal, the P4+1 deal is going to move ahead. All these other nations, they're already in Tehran. They're making deals. They're signing contracts for oil and gas and product sales and tourism. They're building up tourism. They're out there making business here. And all of the American companies that might be part of that economic boom, they're still at home because they don't know what's going on. And when that 2-month window that Congress voted itself, in defiance of the Constitution, expires, it's going to be too late. If Congress fails to kill the Iran deal, you're going to see all these American businesses going over to Tehran saying, okay, we're here to do business, and Tehran's going to say, sorry, you know, we signed all the contracts weeks ago. There's nothing left here for you. You know, you should have been here 2 months ago when the feeding frenzy was going on, and there would have been something for you. Too late now. So Netanyahu's control of the U.S. government through his whores in Congress is not going to change the reality for Iran. It is bringing tremendous harm, not only to the economy of the United States of America, but to its international reputation. Because now everybody sees, yeah, the U.S. government is Israel's puppet. Golly, we were wrong to think highly of the United States of America or its political leaders. They're just more of the schmucks doing what Israel wants. Netanyahu is still out there escalating the situation, saying, this deal will bring war. I presume that means even if he has to start one himself, which they talked about. Netanyahu stated about a month and a half ago that if the Iran deal goes through, Israel would simply haul off and unilaterally attack Iran and then step back and expect American sons and daughters to go in and clean up the resulting mess because, hey, that's what worked before. Anyway, Republican Tom Cotton was out there speaking for a group of Jewish donors saying a military strike could send Iran back to day zero. We're going to bomb them to the Stone Age. And he's out there ready to go. Okay, Tom, here's your parachute. Here's your rifle. Here's your Dayglow jumpsuit. Go and have fun. The rest of us are going to stay home. And Tom Cotton is obviously a contestant in the I Can Kiss Israel's Butt Deeper and Wetter Than You Can contest. He's got a long way to go to catch up with Hillary Clinton and Mike Huckabee. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. Now, Israel's political talons in the United States of America rests in part on the Christian Zionists. These are Christians who are ardent supporters of Israel because they are absolutely convinced that the people living in Israel today are the exact same as those who were living in Palestine during biblical times, which is not true. Most of the people living in Israel today are descendants of Khazars in Central Asia who converted to Judaism in 800 A.D. The other aspect of this is that Israel has successfully exploited the myths about the end times put out in the Schofield version of the Bible. And there are a lot of Christians running around this country absolutely convinced that if they can help Israel launch World War III, that Jesus is going to come down and invite them all up to the big house when it's all over. Now, thankfully, Christian Zionism is on the wane in the United States of America, in part because all of that loyalty and support demanded of American Christians by Israel is not being returned. And more Christians are appalled at the desecration of Christian sites, at Israel's blocking access to those sites during various holidays, and continued attacks on the churches themselves. And the latest brouhaha involves a panel discussion that was held at the Wolfson Yeshiva in Jerusalem. And the chairman of the Lahava organization, Benzi Goffstein, got up and said, yes, we should be burning Christian churches, that he was fully in support of burning the churches and getting them out of Israel. So, something for you few remaining Christian Zionists to keep in mind. That unquestioning support and loyalty is a one-way street. Now, interestingly enough, getting on back down to Iran, Iran is going to acquire Chinese J-10 fighters in return for oil rights. Like I said, the U.S. is sidelined by all this nonsense with Netanyahu. All the other countries are pouring into Iran. They're making deals. They're going to get the oil. They're going to sell their products. So Iran is going to become the second overseas user of Chengdu Aircraft Industry Group's J-10 fighter, and they're not going to have to pay $1 for them because they've signed a contract to allow Beijing to exploit its largest oil field over the next 20 years. It's a heck of a deal. Now, to illustrate how complicated all of this really can get, the J-10 is a Chinese version of Israel's Lavi fighter, which was developed by Israel at U.S. taxpayer expense. Then Israel turns around and licenses it to China and other countries to manufacture, including some countries that don't really like us all that much. Now then, there's been a suicide bombing in Saudi Arabia in a mosque. Somebody claiming to be ISIS is taking credit for it just when Saudi Arabia needed some bloody shirts to convince their people to continue attacking Yemen and Syria and wherever else they're planning on going. The timing is just too cute here. The U.S. government is clearly preparing to launch a large-scale operation in Syria. They have telegraphed it by launching their first ISIS drone strikes from Turkey. Now, there's a problem with that. We know that ISIS is actually serving U.S. foreign policy interests in Syria. They're a make-believe enemy. And we have been getting reports from inside Syria that U.S. warplanes are seen attacking Assad's forces and dropping supplies to ISIS. And we know those drone strikes aren't very accurate. They're carried out on the basis of a signature. Oh, the signature is this guy is a baddie. Well, ISIS is wearing black, so anything that's painted black, we should bomb that because it belongs to ISIS. No, they're attacking Assad. That's what's really going on. And they're trying to figure out a way that they can all of a sudden convince us that Al-Qaeda and ISIS are now our friends, because otherwise they've opened up a gigantic propaganda door through which Russia can go into Syria, claiming to be on the same side as the United States. We're going after ISIS and Al-Qaeda. So the U.S. basically hoisted with its own petard, creating this make-believe enemy. And they're in a real fix. Lavrov has once again renewed Russia's support to the Syrian people and Syria's legitimate government of Bashar al-Assad. Going to hold the U.S. at bay. The U.S. has already been trying to get rid of Assad for 4 years now, I think. All right, so let's see. Kiev forces violate ceasefire regime 27 times over the last 24 hours. Got that one out there. Over in Great Britain, their defense secretary is praising Egypt. The new Egypt, now that we got rid of that pesky Morsi, it's a more prosperous and more democratic society. No, it isn't. It's another puppet-rule dictatorship. Mubarak was the iron fist of Western control over Egypt. The Egyptian people kicked him out, put in Morsi. The counter-revolution kicked out Morsi, put it back under foreign puppet control, and that's why we should all admire and applaud Egypt. Meanwhile, the U.S. government is actually bragging about their new arms sales to the brutal and autocratic Egyptian regime. Yes, they're oppressing their people, but they're oppressing their people for us, and that makes it a good thing. France is estimating their losses from the cancellation of the Russian Mistral deal at anywhere between 1.5 to 1.6 billion, with a B, euros. I wonder who's going to make up that shortfall for obeying America's foreign policy directives. I have a strange feeling that France, which is in serious economic trouble right now, is not going to want to eat that loss all by themselves. Gee, I wonder where they're going to get the money to make up for this. Now, over in Georgia, they're flat out rejecting the anti-Russian sanctions. They've gone on too far. Russia's their neighbor. They want to do business. And all of these sanctions are in trouble. They're out there. We're sanctioning this country because they won't do what we want. All right, go ahead and sanction them. They start doing business with everybody else. The U.S. and Europe, to a lesser extent, are isolating themselves from the rest of the world with all of these sanctions. And you know how we know that? Look at our relative economies and how stagnated they are. Meanwhile, trade between the BRICS nations has jumped 27%. Let me see. Let me make sure I got the right number. Oh, I had the wrong number. Trade among the BRICS countries has grown by 70% in the last 6 years. BRICS is a happening place. BRICS is finding peace through commerce. They're making money. They're doing deals. They're doing trade. The United States and Europe are drowning in banker-created debt. We got to take a break for commercials, and we'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. I'm looking at the story over at newsantiwar.com. As you know, back in the Bush administration, they started talking about the need to upgrade the U.S. nuclear arsenal because, after all, these are last year's nuclear weapons. They're in the wrong fashion colors. They don't have the latest chrome trim and various other gizmos. And it started out with this idea that, basically Obama back in 2012 proposed a plan was going to cost $200 billion. Not all that much money in today's economy, so forth and so on. The numbers keep going up. And as of the last report from the Center for Strategic and Budgetary Assessment, says it's now going to cost just shy of $1 trillion and probably take about 30 years to upgrade all the bombs. And I'm sure we've got people like John McCain saying, look, I got an idea. Let's just use up all the old nuclear bombs on, well, let's say Iran, Russia, and China, and then we can build entirely new weapons, and it'll probably cost us a lot less money. as it were. All righty, the U.S. Defense Department has now withdrawn the USS Theodore Roosevelt aircraft carrier from the Persian Gulf. And basically, it's been pulled back because of the need to conduct repairs on board the ship that cannot be carried out at sea. That's pretty serious stuff. And it's going to leave the Gulf in October to be replaced with the USS Harry Truman. Now remember, the Theodore Roosevelt, which is called the Big Stick by its crew, had a bit of an embarrassment a while back where it was involved in war games with our European allies down near the Bahamas, I think it was, and a single French submarine was able to penetrate the defenses of the Theodore Roosevelt and its auxiliary screening ships, and in theory, in the exercise, score a fatal hit on the Theodore Roosevelt and several of the auxiliaries. It's another reminder that for all the money poured into these weapons, they're not really very effective, because the goal of the United States military program is making money for its participants, the military-industrial complex that Eisenhower warned us about. Other countries like Russia and China, when they build weapons, the goal is to get a cost-effective system that works. Now, getting on back to the economy here, Scotiabank, pardon me, has issued a warning. The Federal Reserve is cornered, and there are visible market stresses everywhere. And you might want to go on over and read the article. It's linked to WhatReallyHappened.com. And they go down a list of several items that indicate possible break points for this global private central banking network. And it's all being held together with spit, baling wire, and duct tape. And there really is no way out, because the absolute reality is, when you have a debt-based economic system, it is a Ponzi scheme. It is a pyramid. It only works as long as new borrowers are brought in to justify the creation of new money, part of which has to be siphoned off to pay the interest on the old money. And when the base of the pyramid is so large you can't fill it, the pyramid comes crashing down. Now, when you're running a pyramid scam on the entire country, it does take a long while, 100 years. But we're there right now. Yesterday, we were reporting on this amazing shortfall coming out of the COMEX, where they didn't have enough gold to redeem orders that were coming on in, and apparently J.P. Morgan rushed in on their horse to save the day with a $275,000 ounce gold fill to prop the COMEX up, or at least that's what they're saying. We don't know how much of this is physical, how much is paper, how much of it goes down from the New York Federal Reserve down that underground tunnel to J.P. Morgan, which was also a topic that we covered on that History Channel show, America's Book of Secrets, The Gold Conspiracy. That whole Wall Street area is set up like a shell game. And those building facades are the shell, the P is the gold, and they just shuffle it around to say, here, see, we've got your gold, and then they take it down and say, oh, see, you've got your gold, and it's the same gold over and over and over again. Still seeing more and more questions about, is there any of the American people's gold even left in Fort Knox? Because there's not actually been an audit for decades. We're just supposed to take their word that the gold that is the property of the American people is still there in Fort Knox. All righty, the list continues to grow. There are currently 24 nations dealing with major financial crises right now. There are another 14 that are rapidly approaching one. Iraq and Ukraine are on that list. Ukraine is on the verge of default. It hasn't defaulted yet because the very generous people, the IMF and the ECB and the World Bank, are just pouring money all over Poroshenko in the hope that he can somehow kick up this war with Russia that they think is going to solve all their problems by making everybody forget how private central banking and the money junkies basically wrecked the place. Because that's what worked the last two times. Crash of 1907 will fix it all with World War I. Crash of 1929 will fix it all with World War II. Crash of 2008, look how many nations the U.S. has invaded, or drone struck, or tried to covertly overthrow. And again, the difference is, in this day and age, the people of the world know what's going on. They're not believing the cover story about, oh, a day of infamy, Saddam's nuclear weapons, oh, the Lusitania was not carrying weapons, and on and on and on and on. As oil prices continue to drop, we're looking at a potential cut of 36% of oil and gas jobs here in the United States of America. U.S. layoffs surged to 105,000 in July. But still, somehow, magically, the government can take Lord Voldemort's magic wand, wave it over the numbers, and come up with a 5.6 unemployment number, even though we have over 92 million Americans willing and able to work who have not been able to find jobs. Now, McDonald's has entered a phase where they are closing more restaurants across the United States than they are opening. A lot of people are trying to take credit. I saw this article over there in Organic Consumers, and they're basically saying, well, you know, clean food movement, people want clean food, and that's probably part of it. The awareness that McDonald's food may taste really good. It's engineered to be very tasty. It's not necessarily best nutrition, loaded with fats. I don't think that's the entire factor. I'm sure a lot of people avoid McDonald's for health reasons, and Claire and I are two of them. But I think McDonald's decline was triggered by McDonald's corporate decision to abandon their original business model of cheap eats that taste good for people in a hurry and on a budget. And they tried to rebrand and upscale with McCafe and fancy interiors and spent a lot of money to basically upscale all their restaurants, and they have to make payments on that investment. And it didn't really work because the more affluent still see McDonald's as the cheap place to eat, where they're not going to go, and the original clientele simply switched to more affordable places with less pretensions but lower prices. And there are places out there with a lot better food. If I'm desperate for a burger, I tend to go to Wendy's. Somehow or other, it does just taste better. I don't do those places a lot, but when I do, for some reason, just Wendy's seems to hit it right. Now then, back in 2005, Wells Fargo. Actually, I'm going to have to hold this until after the commercial break, because Wells Fargo just got a little bit of a comeuppance on one of the scams they did. We're going to take a break for commercials, and we'll be right back. Hello, hi, America. Welcome back to the show. Now, back in 2005, Wells Fargo Bank, out of the generosity of their heart, the goodness of their souls, and a concern for society in general, created a program ostensibly to educate black communities on building generational wealth. Sounded really good. The program was actually just a sales pitch, a front for luring black people into very predatory loans. Wells Fargo was eventually caught up on this fraud, and they paid some court damages, a wrist slap. But in the process, hundreds and hundreds of black people's homes were foreclosed. These banks do not serve the community. They do not serve the people. They serve themselves. They engage in massive fraud protected by a complicit government. And that is fascism. Now, they're calling it the Maui Meltdown. As you know, the Trans-Pacific Partnership negotiators have been here in Hawaii, and apparently they've missed a key deadline. They're still absolutely log-jammed over issues like GMO labeling. And we're starting to hear more and more word about the Trans-Pacific Partnership, for all the pushing and fast-tracking and screaming and high secrecy involved, may already be dead on arrival, which I think would be a good thing, because I am opposed to the American people being committed to abide by any treaty negotiated totally in secret. Because the government's attitude has been, you don't need to know what promises we're making on your behalf. Just trust us. It will be good for you. Which is what they said about the swine flu vaccine back in 1976. All right, we're going to grab ourselves a phone call. Terry in St. John, New Brunswick. Aloha, what is on your mind?
Good afternoon, Michael. As your sun is high in the sky, mine's just about getting ready to set. So,
okay.
Anyhow, yep. anyways, about the Comar litigation that's going on.
Yes.
I've taken the time to do some more investigating on it, and they have an interesting website, comar.org.
Okay.
And in the latest report that they put out, they had a couple of short paragraphs in the report that really caught my attention. If I may, I'd like to read them to you.
Yes, please.
Okay. It says, the government's latest maneuver is both encouraging and discouraging. It's encouraging, for it demonstrates how desperate the government is to keep us from getting our day in court. Why? What are they afraid of? It's disgusting that having lost two rounds of three, they should try to start all over again. They are hoping we'll give up. Are they hoping we'll bankrupt ourselves? It's especially repugnant given that their strategy of postponement is costing taxpayers. And as any other Canadian government cost Canadian taxpayers, more is unsuccessful attempts to frustrate legal action by Canadians asking social justice. And so I think it's pretty terrible on their part and underhanded.
Of course it is. That's why they're the government. We, the government, we're allowed to be underhanded and spy on you, and because we're the government, and that's our job. No, well, for those who are late coming to the discussion, the Comer lawsuit involves the fact that the Canadian Central Bank, while it is privately controlled, it is considered public property owned by the Canadian people. And the charter for the Bank of Canada says the bank has to provide interest-free loans to the Canadian government for infrastructure development. So far, so good. Back in the 1970s, apparently as part of the requirement to merge with the Bank of International Settlements, the Canadian government stopped obtaining interest-free loans from the Bank of Canada and started getting those loans at interest from other private bankers and sticking the Canadian taxpayers with the resulting interest payments. And the Canadian people are furious about that because it was certainly not something that they were informed of at the time. And basically, the Canadian people who are aware of this are very upset. The Canadian government is trying to keep this thing out of the press. They have literally issued orders to the Canadian media not to report on this. There was a brief interval where websites outside Canada that were talking about this were being blocked at the Canadian border. That created its own set of problems, and Canada has dropped those web blocks as of the last time I checked. But what's going on here is the Canadian people are saying if the government has access to interest-free loans for infrastructure development, why are they borrowing money at interest from private bankers, which makes the private bankers richer on the backs of the Canadian taxpayers, who are now paying more in taxes than they otherwise would have to? And any explanations about, this was a requirement for BIS or anything, the Canadian people aren't interested in that. They're feeling like they are cheated, and they are very right to be angry. The other reason this Comer lawsuit is getting virtually no coverage at all here in the United States is we're dealing with almost the exact same situation down here. Our Constitution allows the U.S. government to create and issue its own debt-free currency, to spend it into circulation, to buy what the government needs. It flows through commerce without generating interest obligations to a private bank. The government then taxes it back at the same amount at the end of the cycle to balance the books. It's the economic system the U.S. started with, and it worked very well for the young nation and its people. But private central bankers can't stand the idea of a government creating its own money instead of borrowing it from the bankers at interest. And 100 years ago in this country, a corrupted Congress and a corrupted president sold this nation back into the same predatory banking slavery we had fought a revolution to break free of, and it's called the Federal Reserve. So now the U.S. government, instead of creating and spending its own money, borrows money from the Federal Reserve that is likewise created out of thin air, on which interest is charged. Interest that you, the American people, have to pay through your labor and taxes down the road. And it's a big scam. Private central banking is a 300-year-old financial fraud that has survived. It's made the Rothschild family collectively worth something like $15 trillion. And all it's cost them is ink, paper, some printing presses, a couple of computers, and the right bribes to the right politicians. And the Canadian people are absolutely justified being furious with their government over this financial skullduggery of being literally sold into the slavery of these bankers, just as the American people ought to be angry at being sold into the slavery of the owners of the Federal Reserve.
Yeah, and I thought originally Comer might be a person's name, but in fact it's Committee of Monetary Economic Reform, an acronym for that. And I had seen a couple of presentations, the CBC interview with Rocco Galletti, the lead lawyer, and I find it quite amusing. The interviewer asked him if he was using this litigation as a way to get rich, and he said if I wanted to be rich, I would have been a divorce lawyer.
Yeah. Well, that kind of attack from the interviewer. I mean, the reality is the Canadian government understands they don't really have a legal leg to stand on. The Canadian government, basically didn't have legal justification to stop obtaining interest-free loans from the Bank of Canada. That's why they're trying to stall. That's why they've met so many defeats in the court system. And they're in a panic there because when the majority of the Canadian people find out just how badly they have been cheated over the last 3 decades, we know the Canadians, they'll kick over a trash can in the street and that'll be the end of their civil disobedience, but they're going to be upset.
Yeah, I think it was 1972 it was. Yes. Put into effect?
Yep.
So, and another video that I watched was with the chair lady, Ann Emmett.
Yes.
And boy, what a doll she is to listen to. Very, very, very knowledgeable, very eloquent. And she commented that since this was put into place, Canada has put out $1.1 trillion to pay
in the interest payments.
Pay the bank
yeah, okay. We're going to have to let you go and take a break for our top of the hour news. Yeah, all those Canadian people are owed refunds on the interest. So are the people of the United States of America for the last 100 years. We'll be right back after the news with Larry Nichols. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 3. The phone lines are open, 877-300-7645. And we just heard from Larry Nichols. He's had something unexpected come up. Not going to be able to spend time with us today. We're going to reschedule. We'll get him back on the show. He's got a lot of information to share about the Clintons going on down there in Arkansas. So we'll be talking to him again real soon. In the meanwhile... Okay, let's see. There's something weird's going on with my website right now. I'll have to look at that on the next commercial break. Probably the hackers are coming in again. I was, during the break, looking at the Fox News feed, and basically all of the candidates who are going to be on the debate tonight are already up there making presentations. This is what we're going to talk about. And, of course, I have the sound turned off and the closed captions turned on so I can keep an eye on what's going on here. But it reminds me of a little experiment that you might want to try tonight during the debates, as you're watching them, after they've gone through all the words and everything you want to hear. Turn the sound off completely and just watch their faces while they talk. And you will get a really strong indication of how real or fake these people are. I was looking at Carla Fiorini and just... Well, if you watch her with the sound turned off, you'll understand what I'm talking about. So that's always a really good exercise to really get a gut sense about what's going on with those people. All righty, now then, let's see. Planned Parenthood is pulling out all the stops, trying to recover from this horrible, horrible situation that they find themselves in. And a lot of people were very surprised. Planned Parenthood has what they call a clergy advisory board. And this clergy advisory board includes 3 Reformed Jews, 3 Episcopalians, 2 United Church of Christ, 2 Baptists, 1 Unitarian, 1 Christian Church, DOC, 1 Sufi, and 1 Muslim, who have issued a statement saying that Planned Parenthood is doing God's work, which I guess anything is going to be God's work if God's salesmen get a big enough piece of the action. But, I mean, they are really desperate to try and drag out and say, see, the priests say it's okay. That makes it okay. And we've got scientists who say it's okay. And nobody's buying it right now. Now, as you heard on the SRN News Break, this story about yesterday's shooting at the Tennessee Movie Theater is beginning to fall apart. And more it looks like not only was this a staged shooting incident to push the gun grabber agenda, it got botched really, really badly. Now, they've identified the suspect as 29-year-old Vincente David Montano, who was shot and killed by the police. He had a hatchet. He had a pellet gun, not a real gun, and a fake bomb in his backpack. Now, maybe somebody talked this kid who was under treatment for mental illness. Maybe thought it was a practical joke. We're going to go in and scare everybody. It'll be a lot of fun. And maybe they were going to have an incident, plant a real gun on him. I don't know. But there are a couple of issues that you need to keep in mind. Yesterday, the reports were the dead suspect was a 51-year-old male. Vincente Montano is 29. And if Vincente Montano had a pellet gun, who fired the 8 to 10 real gunshots witnesses reported hearing? This thing is really crumbling here. I'm not the only person who is already skeptical about what's going on. There was an article over in 21st Century Wire basically saying this whole scenario sounds very similar to that staged Canada shooting last year. Yeah, it does. It does. As I was joking yesterday, the gun grabbers are out there saying, how many more people are we going to have to kill? I'm sorry, how many more innocent people will have to die before you law-abiding citizens will surrender your firearms to us? Seems to be kind of a common situation going on out there. Alrighty, so moving on here. The reality is the gun-grabbing agenda is in serious trouble right now. Because, surprise, surprise, American high schools across the country are now embracing target shooting as a sport. Apparently, skeet shooting is really taking off in some parts of the country. And it is a good sport. It's a lot of fun. And it's certainly the reality when I was a kid. I grew up in a part of the country where you just automatically got your first gun on your 12th birthday. And you got the lecture on gun safety, which was the second religion. And the first time you mishandled that weapon, you would get a trip to the woodshed, would keep you eating dinner, standing up for at least a week. Guns were just part of life. They weren't strange, they weren't mysterious, they weren't objects of fear, they were tools. And yes, we would take our guns to school. There were no school shootings. That would have been stupid for somebody to try. We put our guns in the cloakroom, because on the way home, we'd be stopping by the fields to chase the varmints out. That was just normal life, being able to handle and use a gun. And this is also a time when the U.S. government was taking all the surplus rifles left over from World War II and just giving them to schools to get shooting programs started. Yes, you all need to learn how to use guns. So it's all falling apart. Now, here's a very bizarre story. In response to the shooting on the military base, where some people got killed, State Representative Tom Barrett, a Republican of Potterville, and I'm trying to figure out which state this is actually in, Lansing State Journal is where the origin of the thing. He wants to introduce a bill that would exempt the military personnel from Michigan's pistol-free zone restriction while they are in uniform. So all the crazies have to do is avoid anyone in a uniform, which they're already doing, and they'll still have a free kill zone to play in. And we remember the last country where ordinary citizens were disarmed and everybody in uniform had a gun. It was called Nazi Germany, and look how well that worked out. We're going to take a phone call. Mark in North Carolina. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, hi, Mike. Mike, I was at the gym working out, and I saw, I think it was Fox News. It was saying that it looks like the fact that oil is going down, and I think it's a good thing it's going down, obviously, is because of, it looks like they think the Iran deal is going to go through. But my question to you is this. I kept hearing that Russia is going to suffer because of the lower oil prices and blah, 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 blah. Yet Russia is one of the biggest proponents of the Iran deal in the first place. As a matter of fact, they're like almost a partnership with Iran. Okay, they were almost like their sponsor. So what's going on?
Well, we were all told that Russia's economy was fragile and going to be destroyed by crashing oil prices, which were engineered by the United States and Saudi Arabia by opening up those valves. But it turned out Russia's economy is far more robust and resilient, certainly than the economies of either the United States of America or Europe, because the actual result of the oil price crash was huge fiscal damage. We had oil companies that were shutting down, having to go bankrupt because they'd been operating right at the edge. And yes, Russia's economy was harmed, but nowhere near as much. So it's complex, and it sort of underscores the fact that whoever's making this foreign policy, they'll get a soundbite that sounds good. If we crash oil prices, Russia will suffer. And they don't seem to really think these things all the way through. And I understand politicians don't think things all the way through. They are supposed to have advisors who are going to stand up to them and say, what you're proposing here is not going to work. Unfortunately, I think Washington, D.C. has become so corrupted and politicized that even the advisors are just going to go along with the prevailing fairy tale because they don't want to lose their cushy jobs. Anyway, listen, we got to let you go, Mark. We're going to take a break for commercials, and we'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here, and it does look like what we're seeing here is they're just wrapping up that first debate, the kiddie table debate that nobody was really paying attention to. And everybody's now waiting for the main event, which is going to start at 10 minutes to 9 p.m. Eastern Time, for those of you who want to watch. All righty. My server and my website seems to be working okay, but apparently there was an update to Firefox, which is behaving badly, so I'm probably going to switch back to Chrome. I miss a country where we have standards. And I got to tell you, I'm enjoying my little VIC 20. I found this at a garage sale a couple of weeks ago, and it's great. You type things in, you get stuff out, no hassle, no whatever. Which reminds me, Microsoft apparently has managed to anger huge numbers of people with Windows 10. And everyone was saying, oh, it's a free upgrade. Of course you're going to want it. And a lot of people got into it. And what they've discovered is a lot of the features that were parts of Windows 7 and Windows 8 are not in Windows 10. If you want them, it's an additional monthly fee. Even the little solitaire game in the games area now has a monthly subscription price if you want to play it, which I don't. And boy, am I glad I did not upgrade. What a sneaky, underhanded thing to do. Now, IT managers are very upset because on their Windows machines networks, Microsoft presumed to download the files to upgrade to Windows 10 on everybody's machine, to have them sort of pre-positioned so that the instant the user said, I want to push the button, boom, it would be off and running. And as a result, networks of machines that have no intentions of upgrading to Windows 10 are being overloaded by all these files, being pushed onto machines that don't want an upgrade and companies that don't want to upgrade. Microsoft's attitude seems to be, you will upgrade. Those are not your computers anymore. Those are our computers. It says so in the end-user license agreement. We own them all. You merely rent them from us now, you cyber serf, you. You should crawl over and kiss our boots that we even allow you in the same room with our wonderful products. Now, there's a new problem regarding communications. It's called man-in-the-cloud attack, and it's a reference, of course, to the man-in-the-middle attack on communications. And apparently there is a common flaw in most cloud-based file synchronization services that will allow cyber criminals to grab your files off the cloud and even infect you with malware without you noticing, without them needing your password. They're pushing all these new products out there. Oh, it's the cloud. We're going to the cloud. And it's nothing but problems. It's all there to make it easier for your data to be stolen by the government and, obviously, of course, by the cyber criminals. By the way, apparently over in Great Britain, they just passed a new law regarding copyright that makes the use of iTunes illegal. Specifically, the feature where you can take a music CD and copy the music files to your computer, which is kind of a common thing that we tend to do. And the attitude coming out of the music corporations now is that if you want to have the CD and you want to have the same song on your computer, that's a new license. You have to buy another copy. And if you want the same song on your smartphone, you have to buy another license for that. And if you want it on your tablet, you have to buy another license for that. So that even though you are just one person only listening to the song, at a time, you have to have 4 licenses to have the music available wherever you want it. The music isn't that good. Let's be honest about that. But, that's how completely over the top they've gone with this, we're going to protect our intellectual property. You're going to protect it out of existence. If you make it so much trouble we can't use it easily and cheaply, we're just going to quit. We're going to go back to playing our own musical instruments, dust off the guitar and the 5-string banjo and just say, hey, we'll just make our own songs now. Forget about all these big bands and large corporations. They just got too difficult to deal with. Now, as you probably heard on the news, the U.S. government is accusing Russia of hacking an unclassified email system at the Pentagon, which shut it down for 2 whole weeks. Actually sounds to me like hardware failure. But government officials are telling NBC, Russia broke into the Pentagon computers. Bad Russia. Ooh, bad Russia. Heck, got to learn how to hate the Russians here. And I have 2 comments. First of all, there's no way of knowing who did it because anybody who's doing cybercrime uses cutouts. Compromised servers in China, Russia, wherever. That's just a reality. They don't know it came from Russia. Unless the NSA is all of a sudden doing their job. And if they are, how did the break-in happen in the first place? Because isn't this the sort of thing, the protection of the government's computer infrastructure, the NSA is supposed to prevent? Or are they too busy surfing social media looking for negative contents or looting naked pictures of people from their computers? Now, as you know, shortly after the raid in Abbottabad, where they killed some old guy and tried to pass him off as Osama bin Laden, there was a helicopter crash in which many of the people who were involved in that raid on the house died. And it actually was the largest one-day loss of military life in the whole campaign in Afghanistan. Helicopter came down, killed a bunch of people. Now, the families of the members of SEAL Team 6 who were killed in that helicopter crash have been trying to find out just what happened. They filed Freedom of Information Act requests, and it shouldn't be any kind of a secret because they're in a war zone. But the Obama administration has violated a judge's order to turn over documents regarding this crash that killed these members of the SEAL team. And everybody's saying, why? What do they have to hide over there? I think they've got a lot to hide. Everywhere. They've got dead bodies in every closet in the White House by now. Okay, now down in Kansas, there's this mathematician. Her name is Clarkson. And she has been running statistical checks on the election results from that state. And like so many other people, she is finding indications of massive, widespread election fraud. And this is an issue we have to bring up. Because we're not going to be free of election fraud next year. Everybody's going to be out there with the big money trying to buy the election by hijacking these machines. And so this lady Clarkson is out there trying to blow the whistle, and the state government of Kansas is trying to shut her down. No, don't tell people the elections are rigged. They'll stop believing that they have to do what we tell them to do. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. We're going to take a phone call. Keith in Montana. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike. Good to hear you in there today. Hey, I wanted to mention something about that bin Laden thing. You know, I've got 4 decades in radio electronics, and the old saying about looking for what's, you know, there or not there and stuff. When they released the photos of the so-called bin Laden house, I thought that was kind of interesting because the other photo that was released was the alleged old man sitting there with a remote in front of a computer and stuff. But if you look at that photo, I noticed that James Corbett has kind of like a panned image of it. Anyway, it's a double plug outlet.
Yes.
That feeds down into the utility bus bar, which also looks like it's a regular UL 120 volt. But in Pakistan, they use 240 volts at 50 hertz, whereas we use 120 volts at 60 hertz.
Yes.
And I thought that was interesting when you really studied that photo.
Yeah, we call attention to that, I think, at the bottom of the gallery of fake dead bin Ladens. But by the time we got down to the bottom of the page, for me, the case was made on the fact that they were trying to flood all these obviously faked photos onto the Internet showing a dead bin Laden with U.S. soldiers, and they all turned out to be, you know, very poorly done fakes. A very rapid job, obviously, when they realized they didn't have the real bin Laden. They woke everybody up and said, get out to Photoshop and make us some pictures. And we did have a confirmation, at least one of them was in fact the photo the Obama administration was showing around Congress to say, see, we got bin Laden, we're really good. And it's just another hoax from a government that doesn't know how to do anything other than hoaxes and dirty tricks. That's how they survive. Lies, fraud, deception, and dirty tricks.
Yeah, I noticed for even if they use 2 plugs over in Pakistan, one of them has a rounded side, unlike our flat polarized side that we have over here.
Yes.
And that was a key thing to me, too, because not one of those plug-ins had a rounded side. They were all flat, just like 120 volt, 60 hertz ones, you know.
Yeah, and the plugs are all different for various reasons so that you don't plug the wrong appliance into an overvolted outlet. And, of course, they make lots of money with those little adapters they sell at the airport as you go from country to country. But, yeah, more than a few people had pointed out that the electric supply in that room was not consistent with the claim that the picture was shot in Abbottabad.
Yeah. All right, that sounds good there, Mike. You have a great weekend. You too, with Claire, too, okay?
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go here. Now, the Food and Drug Administration has issued their first ever cybersecurity alert, and they're calling attention to the fact that more and more hospitals are using remote control computerized devices for various therapeutic purposes, such as drug pumps. You know, gone are the days where they would hang the bag up on the stand and gravity would take the medication in. Now there's a big automated machine that pumps it and meters it and controls it, but it's all computerized, and like everything else, it's got wide open Wi-Fi ports. And the FDA has issued a warning that the Symbic infusion system manufactured by Hospira contains vulnerabilities in the software that could allow a hacker to remotely adjust the dosage of a drug, either cutting it off completely or triggering a massive overdose. And once again, where is the NSA in all of this? Aren't they supposed to be doing something about all the cybercrime? Isn't that why we were supposed to accept the loss of our Fourth Amendment right to privacy? I mean, it's completely out of control. Homeland Security is admitting this latest CISA info-sharing bill basically erases privacy protections for we the American people. And if you read that end-user license agreement that's coming with your Windows 10, it says we're going to take everything off your computer and just sell it to whoever wants it. And all of the privacy settings on Windows 10 are defaulted to basically off. If you want any privacy at all, you must go in there and switch it back on manually. Now, the head of the FBI is out there saying that the American people should have no right to any privacy whatsoever in their files and communications, because that's only going to aid the terrorists. And along that same line, over at techdirt.com, they have an article on how NSA apologists actually are saying that companies like Apple, who have protections on your data, are materially supporting ISIS. In other words, if you use encryption, if you put up a firewall, if you unplug your data and air gap it, you are providing material support for ISIS. That's how hysterical they're getting. And again, the fact that NSA cannot find any of these cyber criminals, the crypto locker, the ransomware, or any of that stuff, it's all a gigantic bluff. The only people that are looking at are the law-abiding American citizens. Steal our business secrets, steal naked pictures of our significant others to drool all over. Now, here's a very, very bizarre story. Up in Canada, students created this so-called hitchhiking robot, which they just simply let loose, and to see if people would pick it up and give the robot a lift to the next generation of the robot set. Well, apparently, down in Philadelphia, the hitchbot ran into somebody who really was not all that happy with the idea of a robot, and basically smashed it, decapitated and dismembered, took it apart right in the streets. And apparently a local tech group is getting together to repair what they're describing as the beloved robot and get it out on the road again. Very, very heartwarming. And it's kind of interesting to see all this sympathy for the dead lion and the dead robots, but not, of course, for those undeserving Palestinian children or the unborn over there at Planned Parenthood. And this is the government and the media trying to decide for us what we'll care about. You don't want to care about the Palestinians. You don't want to care about those premature babies, being sold off you don't care about them. But the lion, the lion was so fluffy. He suffered so much. The robot. It really is amazing here. And it's getting even a little more bizarre. There's a story over in Blacklisted News where a panel of judges at the Fifth Circuit U.S. Court of Appeals have ruled that merely having an air freshener in your car or bumper stickers constitutes reasonable suspicion of criminal activity and probable cause, meaning the police can search your car without your permission and without a warrant for having an air freshener. It's amazing just how crazy it's getting. Now, Utah is showing a little bit of common sense. Fortunately, this whole thing about we've got to ban the Confederate flag, we've got to ban the Gadsden flag, we've got to ban anything that's offensive, it's already starting to wane because there was an attempt up in southern Utah to rename a canyon there that is a point of historical pride for the state's largest NAACP chapter, no less. And there's a landmark called Negro Bill Canyon, which was named for this black cowboy who lived and worked there in the 1870s. He's a historical figure, and his name was Negro Bill, and they named the canyon for him. And some people came in and said, you can't have that name, you've got to change him to William Canyon or whatever. And basically the official said, no, actually, we're going to keep the name. It's part of our history. Okay, and Thomas Paine once said that you cannot ever tell the truth if you're worried about offending somebody. And he's absolutely right. We're in a tyranny of people being offended by everything that we do right now. And we've got to stand up and say, I'm going to tell the truth about what I'm really feeling. And if you're offended, too darned bad. We'll be back after these few words. Hi, America. Welcome back to the show here. Last segment of our program here as we wind down to the big debate, the main event, let's get ready to rumble, or debate, or whatever it is they're going to do. Maybe that's how we ought to pick our future candidates. Put them in a big arena, last one still standing. All right, you're the candidate. You're tougher than the rest of them. Okay, now out in California, a little bit of good news. The fight regarding mandatory vaccinations may not be over. Libertarian Tim Donnelly has launched a new referendum to overturn California's forced vaccination law, Senate Bill 277. They're going to try and get it on the ballot for next November. He's a former state assemblyman and gubernatorial candidate, and he's basically filed the paperwork, and now they got to start collecting names on petitions to get it on the ballot. Because by golly, we're going to decide what needles get stuck in our body. We're not cattle. We're not pigs. We're not chickens, where the owners of the factory can just shoot us up with whatever medications they want. Or maybe they think they can. Over at the White House petition website, they had a petition against mandatory vaccinations that exceeded the required 100,000 signatures, even though there was an obvious attempt to freeze the signature count, which had to be stopped when everybody said, hey, you've frozen the signature count. So the White House has now been forced to respond, and basically they said no. The official White House position is, we promise you a response for all petitions above the signature limit, and go jump in a lake is a valid response, which is what they said. There were two petitions. There was the one for end to mandatory vaccinations. There was another petition for a pardon for NSA whistleblower Edward Snowden that also went over the 100,000 limit. Now, there's another petition that's out there asking Obama to keep the promise he made while campaigning in 2007 to require mandatory GMO labels. And I'm sure when that crosses the 100,000 signature, we will get, no, that's our official response. Go to heck. We don't care what you people say. We're getting money from the GMO companies. We're getting money from the vaccine makers, and that's all that really matters here. Now, one of the big arguments that we're always getting from the GMO companies about why they're opposed to mandatory labeling is how much it's going to cost them to change all those labels on all our products, which is nonsense. They're constantly changing the labels anyway. It's actually not that expensive to redo the artwork and the plates for the next print run of the label. And by the way, Big G has so far spent $51 million just this year alone to defeat GMO labeling, and I think that's considerably more than it would cost to change those labels. They know the stuff is bad. They know the people don't want it. If they actually believe GMO was beneficial, it would be all over the packaging. Contains more GMO than our competitor's product. More GMO than last year. Your minimum daily requirement of GMO. But they want to hide it. They want to take away your right to know what you're putting in your mouth. That's what they want to do. Now, out in Los Angeles, and I'm almost ashamed to admit I used to live in California, there is a new plan being put forward by the Los Angeles County Supervisor Hilda Solis that the best way to prevent drug overdoses is we're going to ban music festivals. That's it. That's their solution. No more music festivals on county property, and that'll make the drug problem go away. No, it won't. You got the CIA trucking the stuff in there by the container load. This is the sort of thing governments who are steeped in drug money themselves will do to make it look like they're opposed to illegal drugs. It's part of the hoax. They love illegal drugs. They're making huge amounts of money off of it. It was one of the things that Larry Nichols and I are going to talk about. Getting on back to that GMO situation, this is kind of weird. This is a story coming out of the Los Angeles Times, no less, where psychiatrists are now saying that picky eating by children is a warning sign for mental health problems. And if you do not like your Michelle Obama school lunch, you must be crazy and we will make you take pills. Basically what it's coming on down to. At the same time, we're getting reports from other researchers looking at what's in those Michelle Obama school lunches and saying that the over-reliance on manufactured and processed food is going to increase the likelihood of cancers in those school kids. Now, kids are picky eaters. They're too young to be brainwashed by TV as to what they want. They're eating what their body tells them their body needs, and they're not eating the stuff they shouldn't have. If you were raised by parents who said, clean up your plate, there are Chinese children starving and blah, 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 you tend to be more overweight as you get older because you get into the habit of just eating everything in front of you whether you want it or not. Kids who are picky eaters, who are allowed to be picky eaters by their parents, they grow up with a healthier weight because they're used to the idea of, I'm going to eat what my body tells me I need, and then I'm going to stop. And that's it. Our health is being damaged by commercial enterprise and social custom here. Now, over in Alabama, they've quarantined a home over a possible Ebola case, and they're saying the guy traveled to a country with Ebola cases, didn't identify the country or name the patient. Here comes the propaganda for the run-up of the announcement of a new and soon-to-be mandatory Ebola vaccination, because as you know, they've announced they're conducting trials of a new genetically modified Ebola vaccination over there in Africa. And the only way they're going to sell that product is to bring back Ebola as the new booga booga. Oh, Ebola is here. Get your vaccination right now. And by the way, for those of you who, like me, are enthusiasts for nanosilver, remember, we actually found a document from the Air Force's own laboratory showing that nanosilver is effective against hemorrhagic fevers, including Ebola. But they can't patent that. They can't make money off of it. Oh, no, we've got to have this new whiz-bang thing that we've invented that nobody else can duplicate because that's how we're going to make our money. And there's not enough money being made treating people who are actually really sick. So the new business model is selling tons and tons of medication to perfectly healthy people. We're up to something like 36 or 37 mandatory vaccinations for children. And they're now talking about the list is going to reach 200. The little kid's going to explode before they get that last shot in. It's just going to blow up like a little balloon and go pop, all over the walls. It's all about money. They don't care about your health. In fact, they need you to be chronically ill because that is how they make their money. Remember the swine flu vaccination scandal of 1976. Government declared it mandatory. You will all get your shot. And then they had to cancel the program when it turned out the vaccine was killing 50 times as many people as the flu itself was. We're already in the same situation with the MMR vaccine, the measles vaccine. The National Vaccine Court has acknowledged over 100 people have died from complications of the measles vaccine. The CDC has reported only one death from measles in the last 10 years, and that was a woman who had just gotten the measles shot. They don't care about your health. You're just the herd, the livestock. You're just there to be made money off of. That's your place in life. You're here to support the exalted lifestyles of their most high nobility, the bankers. All right, there's the music. I got to get out of here and see if I can fix what's going on with my website. We'll be back tomorrow here on the Genesis Communication Network. Until then, stay safe, stay well, stay skeptical, stay informed. Make good choices. Go ahead and get angry. You're about due. Share what you know with everybody else you know. We've got to break through the few remaining walls of ignorance in the American society and wake everybody up. We'll be back tomorrow. Aloha, America.